Hasan hosted an Al Jazeera event, which included a couple of panelists. Manuel Navon, Tel Aviv University lecturer. Benny Morris, formerly of the sort of new historians who got all the documents from the Israeli government in the 80s that showed that the narrative of who was living in Palestine and who wasn't, and what kind of society existed prior to the establishment of Israel was wrong. He subsequently found it too difficult, I guess, to live with that reality.
You gotta do what you gotta do is his position now.
But here's the first clip. Levy was a member of the Israeli government. He was one of the negotiators for the Oslo Accords, I believe it was, right? In 93. We've interviewed him many times over the years. Here he is.
Next to recent MR guest Diana Boutu.
Yep.
The only country in the Middle East where Arabs can elect their officials, be elected, be judges at the Supreme Court, be president of a university. The only free country in the Middle East is Israel.
Dan, do you want to respond to that?
I find it staggering that the gentleman to my right is telling the Palestinian citizen of Israel how she is experiencing the reality under which she lives. It's a staggering moment for me. Now, there were different strands to Zionism. Okay? There was a cultural Zionism, there was a binational Zionism. This could have gone in different directions. From the perspective of 2024, 75 plus years in, the idea that this is just something benign doesn't match with the reality that has been lived. Now, I would say it's clear what this has meant for Palestinians, but I would argue it's not doing what was written on the tin for Jews either. I don't think either Israeli Jewish or global Jewish safety is best served by the actions we see day in, day out in Gaza.
In other words, the whole narrative that Israel is what keeps Jews safe is the opposite. First off, if you have an attack on October 7th, that is the worst attack in 75 years against Jews since the Holocaust, there's something gone horribly wrong with your project to protect Jews. If you invoke Jews and Judaism in your genocide, ethnic cleansing, war crime ridden assault on the people of Gaza, or frankly, the West Bank at this point, and points earlier, you're putting Jews in harm's way. And that's coming from a guy who was part of the Israeli government. Let's play the second clip. Daniel Levy again. Benny Morris, who again was a historian who was part of the new historians in the 80s, who got access for the first time to documents that showed exactly, what was done to the Palestinian people in the founding of Israel. Massacres and wholesale expulsion, stealing of land, put to lie the idea of the Palestinians decided to walk away and then got upset. Ilan Pappé, also part of that group. When the Israelis decided we're going to relock up all those documents because we don't like what it's revealing about our origins, some of those historians decided, well, the writing's on the wall, and this is not a recipe. I don't want to go down this road. It's as if, like, Eric Foner, who took a look at Reconstruction, and the more actual academic research that was done, they found, like, these stories of Reconstruction that black people weren't able to actually effectively lead are not true. What actually happened is there were massacres across the South of black politicians, and they were driven out. That there was a concerted effort by former plantation owners and other and some in northern industrialists to reestablish at least some regime that wasn't slavery, but that had some of the economic benefits of slavery, like low-cost labor. It's as if, like, Eric Foner decided at one point, like, oh, no, this is actually going to hurt me in the academy. So
I'm with DeSantis now because I want to go dine out in Florida.
yeah, here is Benny Morris.
Daniel Levy.
When I was in a Zionist youth movement and president of the World Junior Jewish Students, being pumped with the talking points and the propaganda points, I really think they were more sophisticated, and I may be misremembering this. I genuinely cannot believe that this is what now constitutes an Israeli attempt at defending and putting your best foot forward. But then I look at the reality in Israel today, and of course that's what it should look like, because what's the reality we're living in? And let me take two snapshots. First of all, it's really not that surprising that we've got to this point when you consider the impunity with which the external community and Israel's allies and the West and the US treat Israel, despite the litany, the entire spectrum of violations of international law and of human rights. And yet every time there's an excuse, there's a veto at the United Nations, then there's more arms. And in that respect, don't expect Israelis to come up with better talking points when they don't have to, because you're willing to run cover for them and create completely the wrong incentive structure.
Please respond briefly.
I must put this. You've brought three people in a panel, two of whom are pro-Palestinian,
Yes.
anti-Zionist.
That's the purpose of the panel, yes.
It's supposed to be two against one. That's the way you've organized
Yes,
this.
we did ask you to watch the show before you
I
came
consider
in.
myself pro-Jewish,
No, you're not.
pro-Palestinian,
No.
pro-human. I consider myself...
Let me finish.
Please.
Let me finish. You are a pro-Palestinian propagandist. That's all you've become, just so that you know that.
The idea of being like a pro-Palestinian propagandist, if 30 years since Oslo, 31 years since Oslo, if 31 years of engaging with your country, at first as a government official and then as a scholar, essentially, turns you into a pro-Palestinian propagandist, it's probably for good reason. I mean, that if that's the perception, and I've interviewed Levy probably for over the course of 20 of those years, and there is no doubt, I mean, in my mind, like, his evolution is, like, you know, I think it's similar. If you were conscious of Israel's actions 20, 25 years ago, at one point over the course of that time, it becomes increasingly clear that their actions, very often even their rhetoric now, does not comport with the sort of the narrative that we're led to believe, that there's no partner for peace on the other side, that Israel only wants peace, that it's not an expansionist project. And again, like, you know, there was a brief window in which these documents were released in the 80s, and it's taken a long time for the dissemination. I think early on this show we played that documentary by Benny Bruner, but I didn't, I guess maybe he even made that in like the aughts, I feel like. Arguing the existence of a Palestinian society and culture. This was not like just some tents in the desert that at least some of us grew up being taught.
There's some more from that, Benny Morris, if you want.
Let's just see a little bit more.
This is, this guy, and it gets on the question of, Morris just straight up denies that anybody has died from malnutrition in Palestine, which is just a pretty heinous lie. But this is another question here from the audience for Morris.
I'm Martin Shaw, and I wrote a book called What is Genocide?
Perfect person. What is genocide,
to bring
Martin?
Benny back to Gaza, because you said it's a war, and there's collateral damage, and that Hamas knew. And that may be true. But, I mean, the real point is that Israel knew, isn't it? That if you bend the rules of war so that 100 people can be killed for one militant, if you do that thousands and thousands of times with 2,000-pound bombs, you know that the whole of Gaza is going to be a ruin. You know that you're going to destroy that society. And that the only way we can understand that in an overall sense is not a series of war crimes. It is one big crime, and I think the name for that is genocide.
Absolutely.
Do you want to respond to that? Hold on, let him respond.
I think I've already made the point. The Hamas, when it attacked Israel on the 7th of October, knew that Israel would retaliate with bombing and knew that lots of Gazan civilians would die. They were hoping for that because that looks good on Western television images. But they say that killing a lot of Gaza civilians is good because they go to heaven. They become martyrs. So this is
Benny,
allowed.
Benny, can I ask you a question? Hold on,
Did I say something wrong?
No, I just want to follow your logic here.
Hamas knew that.
I just want to follow your argument is Hamas knew that if they did this, we'd do a genocide, so we did a genocide.
Not genocide, no. You're missing.
Like they knew that we would come and kill lots of people, so we did. It's a very weird argument.
They knew that Israel would kill lots of Gazans.
They knew that Israel would kill lots of Gazans. Not a great
Yes, they knew that. Going after the Hamas, they knew that lots of Gazan civilians would be killed, and they were happy with this because of international pressure which would result.
Okay, we're running out of time. I want to take a gentleman in the suit. Yes.
Benny Morris, you say that the ICC should issue an arrest warrant against the Israeli Prime Minister and the Israeli War Minister, Yoav Gallant. But on the 9th of October, they imposed a total siege on 2.3 million civilians in Gaza, depriving them of water, medicine, food. That is what they're accused of, starvation as a weapon of war, something that the Syrian and the Russian regimes were accused of. Do you condemn that?
Has anybody been died in Gaza of starvation?
Yes, Benny.
This is total nonsense. The Israeli. You want me to answer?
Yes, I do.
What do you want me to answer?
But I want some evidence. You can't just say things that are false. I'm not going to let you say that.
The Israeli government, I think the ministers debated whether to cut off water, cut off electricity, etc., etc. They eventually resolved not to do that. And though lots of reporters have been saying, and the United Nations, that Gaza is on the verge of starvation, on the verge of famine, etc., etc., that has not happened.
Benny, how do you know that? How do you know that? Hold on, stop heckling. How do you know that, Benny? And please,
I haven't
talk. You don't
read
just have to
any
do it.
report of anyone dying of
There have
starvation.
been many reports.
I haven't read any.
So that makes it nonsense because you haven't read any.
I haven't heard of anybody dying of starvation.
You don't think there's a famine
no,
in northern
Gaza?
Gaza?
No, I think there's a food problem there. Food
Do you think there's a famine in northern Gaza?
I don't know what the word famine means. There is a food problem. There's malnutrition. This I have heard.
But nobody's died. They've all conveniently stayed alive.
As far as I know, nobody has died of starvation in Gaza.
You're a historian.
As far as I know.
I've read quotes from you saying you're a historian. You look at the sources, you find the evidence, and now you're like, I don't know what famine means. I haven't seen anything. I mean, it's a big claims you're making. You should back it up with some evidence.
Okay, first off, famine is actually like a technical term. It literally deals with, it must include deaths from malnutrition. And then I think you go from like famine to extreme famine, and it must include food deprivation for a certain percentage of the people within a region. And every agency that is in charge of assessing this has said that at least northern Gaza was in famine conditions. You're near famine conditions in other parts of the country. We have witnessed video of Israelis blowing up water processing plants. We have seen Israelis lay their bodies down in front of aid trucks so that food wouldn't make it. We saw the U.S. government attempt to build a pier to deliver food. Why was that? Why did they need to do that? Why did they need to do airdrops? Because Israel was using food as a weapon of war. There's just no, like, I don't know what you have to read, what deprivation tank you have to be in to not be aware of these things.
Or even to claim that.
Yes.
No, there are here, just one piece from June. Nearly 6-month-old Fayez Ataya and 13-year-old Abdulkar Al-Suri both died from malnutrition and lack of access to healthcare on 30th May and 1 June 2024. Like, how, I believe that he hasn't read, doesn't know that, because I don't know how a historian could make a claim that is so contrary to that. There's all sorts of names of people that have been documented died of malnutrition in this.
It's crazy.
I think he genuinely didn't. I believe him when he says I haven't read that.
Hey folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.